Okay, let's continue our journey, if we will, through our teaching series here on the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven. So, um, we're, I'm going to jump into the next few references of kingdom, which are in Matthew 9 and 10. Maybe a little shorter discussion today. Maybe we'll see how it goes. But I don't have a whole lot of setup this time. I'm going to somewhat do the similar thing to what we did last time, and there will be moments we kind of sound like a broken record, and that's because I think, especially in Matthew, that's one of the things that we're supposed to grapple with as the people of God as we read these teachings about the kingdom and the gospel. So if it's a broken record, it seems to be that's because it was a broken record for him too. And if that's the case, we want to make sure we're listening to that and hear that. But again, this idea of Matthew really impressing upon us the place of the outsider and the mumser in the kingdom, and that place is in the kingdom, and so it continues to follow this trend of outsiders finding Jesus, outsiders being liberated in Jesus, outsiders finding freedom and healing, literal healing in Jesus, and then religious people struggling with Jesus, religious people questioning Jesus, religious people frustrated with Jesus, but the outsiders ready for Jesus, following Jesus, trusting Jesus. Religious people, and man, I still feel like that's probably true today. We just take Jesus, we co-opt him, and we kind of make him in our image, and we make sure that our Jesus fits our own agendas. And that's not what we see here in Matthew. We need to be confronted by that, right? So Matthew 9, just the same stuff. Jesus forgives the man who was paralyzed and lowered through the roof by his friends, if you remember that story. Very common story. Jesus sees the faith of friends, heals the man, tells him he's forgiven. And what did the religious in their midst do? Freak out about theology. They freak out about doctrine. They freak out about forgiveness. Here's a paralyzed man healed in their midst. And they are more concerned with, and I know we want to be like, yeah, those stupid Pharisees. Guys, we would do the same thing today. We do the same thing today. We're more concerned about our doctrine and our theology than the actual kingdom stuff that's happening all around us, that we should be mesmerized and captivated by and excited and energized by. And we're like, well, it doesn't match our our prescribed belief statements. And I don't want to. Belief statements matter. Those things are important. Doctrine has a place, but it may have been pulled out of place. Was it for the people in the Gospels? Is it for us, right? So then the next story is the calling of Matthew. Here's a tax collector. He can't be in. He's an absolute traitor. He's a traitor to our people. He's not even an Israelite patriot. He sold his soul to Rome. He doesn't follow Torah. He's unclean on and yet Jesus calls Matthew to be a disciple. And then what's the next story? Jesus questioned about fasting. Now, I don't want to throw John the Baptist and his disciples under the bus here, but definitely insiders, right? So outsider, beautiful, beautiful. Here's the insiders, and they've got questions about fasting. So they got questions about whether or not he's doing his faith walk correctly. Does that sound familiar? I hope it does for many of us. And we need to grapple with that. So what's the next story? Well, we have a dead girl and a sick woman. Outsiders. What's the next story? We have a blind and the mute. Outsiders. Finding their insight in Jesus. Okay, so here's our kingdom passage, all right? Jesus went all throughout the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, so we can assume, I think, readily and rightly so and without much question, he's in a Jewish context. He's traveling all throughout Jewish towns and Jewish villages, teaching, and he's in their synagogues. These are God's people. These are the religious communities. These are the spiritual ones. These are and literally the Hasidim. These are the really devoted Jewish community members that have gone up to create a world where they could be as devoted as they wanted to be, which is extremely devoted. So this is the religious of the religious, right? That's where he's at. And he proclaims the good news. And remember, what's the word for good news? Evangelion. So you could literally translate that. He proclaimed the gospel of the kingdoms. That's what we talked about in the last video. The gospel is the pronouncement of the kingdom of God. Notice, by the way, who he goes to with the gospel. This is Jesus' evangelism strategy. Jesus' evangelism strategy is to go to the insiders, not the outsiders. And that's backwards. And I know that we're like, yeah, but those are Jews. That's not. I wonder if Jesus' evangelism strategy would be any different today. Would Jesus evangelize the unbelievers, or would he evangelize the believers? I'll leave that with you to wrestle with. Proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. So notice the proclamation of the kingdom. It's not just a message. It's also a lived out reality. You don't just tell people the kingdom of God is here. You also bring the kingdom with you. You don't just tell people the kingdom of God has arrived. You actually help people experience that kingdom in the way that you bring healing. You don't just tell them about healing. You bring the healing with you. The kingdom of God isn't something that happens later, afterwards, when we die. The kingdom of God is something that happens right now in our midst because it's here. So Jesus proclaims the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. So a failure of spiritual leadership, I would say, is part of what Jesus is seeing here. The people of God, the religious, the spiritual, shouldn't be in this condition. Now, for all of you listening to me that are pastors and clergy, ministers, missionaries, that we should reflect on that. What is the state of the church in our context, whether it's America or somewhere else? What is the state of the church there? Like, honestly. Are people who claim to follow Jesus harassed and helpless? They're following the road we map out for them, and it's not a road that leads to life, and that's not on them, that's on us. And he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field, which is exactly where Jesus goes next. Jesus is going to send them out into the harvest field to do the exact same thing. And Jesus is going to tell his disciples to follow the exact same script. Listen, he's going to tell them to proclaim the kingdom, a gospel. He's going to tell them to bring the evangelion, the gospel of the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is here, and not just tell them the kingdom of God is here, but experience the kingdom of God with them, bring the kingdom of God with them. Kingdom, here's the kingdom. The kingdom is here. Let's experience it together. Let's be a part of it together. That's the objective. Listen, Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits, to heal every disease and sickness. These are the name of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, who is later called Peter, his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Listen, do not go among the Gentiles or any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, proclaim this message: the kingdom of heaven has come near. So he, again, just like Jesus, he's not sending them to the unreligious. He's not sending them to the unspiritual. He's not sending them to the pagans, to the Gentiles. He's sending them to God's people, to the religious, to the spiritual, to those who claim to know. And he says, go tell them the gospel. The kingdom of God is here. And maybe that's just because the Jews were so stupid and they didn't get it. I don't think so. I think this isn't talking about Judaism and Christianity. I think this passage is talking about the dangers of what happens when, and I don't mean religion like religion gets in the way, when our paradigm forgets the bigness, the wonders of the kingdom of God, and our religious practice starts to clog up the system. I think there's relevance in that. And then, but notice what he says, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons, freely you have received, freely give. Jesus says, don't just go tell them the message, be the message. Don't just bring them the message, also enact the message. Don't just go tell people about the kingdom of God, bring the kingdom of God with you. Bring the healing, bring the shalom, bring the justice, bring the restoration. Bring it with you, or else your message is useless, it's pointless, it's void, it's empty, it's impotent. There is a message. So for the other side of the conversation that just loves to just go do, just go bring action, don't ever say anything, there is a message. So make sure you're bringing a message, but bring it with the action as well. It's not either or, it's obviously both and. Do not get any gold or silver or copper to take with you in your belts, no bag for the journey, or extra shirt or sandals or staff, for the worker is worth his keep. Whatever town or village you enter, search there for some worthy person and stay at their house until you leave. As you enter the home, give it your greeting. If the home is deserving, let your peace rest on it. If it's not, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet. Truly, I tell you, it will be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that town. So Jesus says, I want you to go out and I want you to proclaim kingdom and I want you to bring kingdom. I also want you to depend on kingdom. It will be their participation in kingdom that allows you to survive. It will be their participation in kingdom that will be your sustenance. So bring the message, be the message, and receive from the message. There is this sense of solidarity in this whole. And Jesus says the kingdom is all around you. So it's not just condemnation on religious people. It's not just that Christians don't get it. It's not just that. It's that some do. It's that the kingdom of God's kind of found everywhere. It's bursting forth everywhere, inside and outside. People that claim to follow Jesus and people don't claim to follow Jesus. People that are on the outside. The kingdom of God's bursting forth everywhere. Be on the lookout for it and make sure you're participating in the right thing. I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Jesus says, engaging with this kingdom project is going to take some clever shrewdness. This is not something you stumble into. This is not something you do by accident. This isn't something you just make into a church program, just, hit play, get people to sign up on the sign-up sheets, show up to the small groups, and now everybody is obviously on the inside. You're going to have to be innocent as doves, but shrewd as serpents. Like, you are going to have to be intentional about this. You're going to have to be wise about this. You're going to have to be discerning about this. This is going to take some shrewdness. Be on your guard. You will be handed over to the local councils and flogged in the synagogues. On my account, you will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. But when they arrest you, do not worry about what you are to say or how to say it. At that time you will be given what to say. For it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Jesus says, this is not just going to be a walk in the park. This is not going to be easy. The work of the kingdom of God is not something that everybody just... And part of it, he mentions local councils. It's probably a more religious council, like the elders of the people. It's probably a faith community, but it could be more of a socio-political council. But in case it wasn't a faith community, he then says synagogues. This is not going to go well for you, even in the midst of people who claim to be a part of God's project. The kingdom of God's not going to be received universally throughout the community of God's people. And the same is true today. The same is true today. If you try to adhere by every single parameter set out there by evangelical subculture, if you try to please every single people group, to check all the doctrinal boxes for it, be a part of the kingdom of God, Jesus says. Be a part of this greater thing where things are as God intends them to be. Pursue shalom and righteousness and justice. Seek first his kingdom and his tzedakah, and all these other things be taken. It doesn't mean it'll go easy, but everything else will figure itself out, because those are the things that matter. Those are the things that matter. So much more we could talk about. Those are my next few thoughts with those next few references to the kingdom. I'll look forward to keeping the conversation going with wherever Jesus talks about the kingdom next. I'm betting it'll probably show up in the next chapter of Matthew, but I haven't even looked to find out. But he talks about it a lot, so I wouldn't doubt it. Look forward to chatting with you next time. See you then.